The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, greetings from Minneapolis. Coming to you cordless, everybody. It's Wednesday night, July 30th, 2025. I'm Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night, episode number 259. Mark your scorecards at home. We'll take a test like tomorrow, because tomorrow is our 2-year anniversary, July 31st, 2023. We started this shebang. God knows, did I know what I was getting into? No. It's astonishing. So tomorrow is also our 260th show, and I'm not kidding when I tell you, it basically took us 200 shows technically to figure out what we're doing here. Okay, I mean, this is a very odd thing. We started live broadcasting when we started 2 years ago. It was not very common. Podcasting and even video podcasting was extremely common, but live video podcasting wasn't really. Now that's common too. But it took us a while to get the wheels going here because, well, first of all, I don't have a director. I mean, almost most of the people who do this have a crew. I do not have a crew. I could have one, but I can't afford it. I know exactly who I'd hire. I know plenty of people who are really good at this stuff. That's not a problem, but no, can't do it right now. So we had to figure this out on our own. And like I was saying last night, we've gone through several generations of equipment. So, I mean, I think we're on basically a third generation of camera and lighting stuff. At this point, the cameras are controlled by AI, believe it or not, and also our backgrounds and stuff are too. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, we've figured it out over the course of time. It took basically a year and a half for us to figure it out. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell am I doing. Do you have an idea? No, no one does. But I'll tell you who I know has an idea of what they're talking about. Gary Gallus is joining us tonight. He's an economist. He's a professor of economics at Pepperdine University, and we talk about this a little bit. We taped this afternoon about the fact that I don't know if you've ever been to Pepperdine. It's easily one of the most beautiful campuses of any college in the nation. It's really incredible. It's in Malibu. Yeah, Malibu. It's in Malibu. And he taught there. He's retiring on Friday. He taught there for 43 years. A pretty cool run, actually. Pretty cool. And he's written several books, and we'll talk about all that sort of stuff too. He's a very, very engaging guy. I enjoyed this immensely. I hope you do too. And then when we come back, we'll have part two. We have a little Gymcast here, stuff going on that you may not be aware of. There's stuff in AI that I need to tell you about that's become, everyone said, including even me, said, this AI thing isn't that frightening. It's not going to be yeah, okay, there might be unemployment and stuff. It's not going to be that bad. Well, now I'm starting to think, and I'm not the only one. All of a sudden, it's going to be pretty freaking bad. And I don't, I'm not one for gloom and doom here on the show at all. I am not, but you've got to hear this. So first we'll hear Gary Gallus. We'll be back. By the way, so tomorrow night, I should mention this too. Tomorrow night, our guests are Larry Newman, our old friend Larry Newman, bail bondsman and Bigfoot investigator, and Murray Sabrin, economist Murray Sabrin, who was our very first guest on our very first show on July 31st, 2023. Now, I'm very hesitant to book two economists back to back, but Murray's kind of special. He's a friend of ours, and he's been doing this with us for like 5-6 years now. So he made the cut. So that's tomorrow night. We take Fridays off here. We will run a rerun. Don't know what's going to be. We run reruns on Fridays. I'm taking Monday off. We'll run a rerun on Monday too. because I know it's lame. I got to go to the dentist. But it's not good to do a talk show when you're having trouble talking. So we're taking Monday off. We have most of next month booked up already, but I'm going to make an announcement tomorrow at the top of the show. We're making some changes here, and I want you to hear about it from me, from my big mouth. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Anyway, here's Gary Gallus. Joining us from his home in Camarillo, California, professor of economics at Pepperdine University, Gary Gallus. Gary, hi. Thanks for joining us. Now,
thank you for having me.
You were just saying you're retiring from Pepperdine in 2 days, huh?
And officially, it's the end of the month after 43 years of teaching there.
That's fantastic. Good for you. Congratulations. That's quite a tenure.
Well, I must say I lucked into a job in a field that I didn't plan ahead, but I really was a good match for what I did, and I love doing it. So,
you had no plans on being a professional economist?
Well, when I was going to college, my parents, it was clear I was going to graduate school from the time I was 1 day old, according to them. But I was planning on being a math teacher, maybe going to graduate school in math. And I started at the University of Washington, near where I was born. And I was a math, chemistry, and physics major. And I sort of slowly lost interest in some of those. And that's when I took econ classes. And I suddenly became, as one of my friends said, a mathematician gone bad.
Well, as a layperson, I have a lot of economists on the show because, first of all, economics fascinates me personally because it's both kind of an art and a science, both,
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think the general public knows way too little about this. We live in the most capitalist country in the world, and most people in America don't know shit about money.
Well, they don't know very much, and they're not willing to do very much. I think there's this effect where when you know an itty bitty amount, your confidence that you know what you're talking about goes way up, and then it falls as you actually learn more until you are actually an expert.
Yeah.
Well, think of us people who said, well, my vote won't matter. And if my vote won't matter, it's not worth finding out very much, but I'm very confident I know what I'm doing. And that's, I think, where we get into trouble.
Gary, this entire show runs off that premise. I know a little bit about a lot of things.
Well, but, given how easily you can access wisdom out there today, if you wanted to, everything on earth is online. And what do people listen to? Right? Yeah. They don't read classics. They don't read great stuff. They read crap.
Yeah, no, it's true. And they're on TikTok. And have you ever been on TikTok?
I have looked in on TikTok. I am not on TikTok. I have not chosen to enter that particular cesspool.
God bless you, because yes, it's crap. All right. Now, speaking of the public, I know this basically wasn't on the a talk sheet here, but I do have to ask you about this because it's a prevailing thing right now. What do you think of these tariffs? And before you answer, let me just preface this. I've come to the conclusion, I understand theoretically why tariffs shouldn't work. I understand that. But I'm starting to think that what's really going on here is way more than just tariffs, that Trump's using this as negotiating positions and stuff like that. So it really maybe doesn't fit the actual tariff paradigm. What do you think about this?
Well, even if you go back to a famous anti-tariff person, Adam Smith had an exception for why he was opposed to tariffs. And it was for basically wartime preparation. He thought that when England had their navigation acts, it was a good idea, despite the reduction in our wealth from voluntary trades, because it protected us from the Dutch, who were the main rivals. So if we could have more English ships, he said, we could defend ourselves better from the Dutch. It's a price worth paying because what's the end result of protecting ourselves better from opponents? Property rights are more secure, right? Our voluntary arrangements can grow. So there is an exception there where the national defense reasons might dominate other things because of the value of being able to protect our property rights better. As I tell my students, are used to in class, that, you own yourself, but you can be overwhelmed by superior force. So when you
You,
ask you, me, whoever, an individual, you own yourself, but you can be overwhelmed by superior force. The only thing the government can potentially do better for us than we could is joining us jointly together to mutually defend our property so that we can then have more voluntary arrangements. That's it. That's the only thing the government can do better.
right. I take it from your writings and stuff that you would consider yourself a libertarian, right?
I am clearly a libertarian. I was a member of the Libertarian Party for 20 years. They tried to recruit me to run for office, and I wasn't particularly interested in running for office. I have since become an independent. There's so many party things that go on, even with a party that's never going to get far. And it's because I think I've become addicted to the truth. I think something about a true argument, and when I've dealt with libertarians, they tell you what they think.
They do.
Politically,
And
they
that's
won't lie to you because they won't steal from anybody else, right, for you, and they won't steal from you. What's the promise? Well, I mean, that's why you'll never get elected.
That's my problem with the Libertarian Party too, Gary. It bears pointing out they are technically the third party in the United States. They're the only other party that's cleared for federal elections in all 50 states automatically. They are the third party. They can't seem to get their shit together.
Well, I mean, if the society has gotten to the point where you have to buy each election, right? We've abandoned principle. And I just say, well, there's a group. How can I buy their votes? Hey, let's forgive people who went to college and got stupid degrees of their debt, because then I can buy their votes.
Yeah.
Well, if what happens is we as people, hopefully not you or I, right, seem to be more than willing to sacrifice somebody else's rights to ours under any occasion. In that world, the government sucks because we suck, frankly. That's what Leonard Reed would say, right? You are willing to do this. You'll vote for those people.
Yeah.
If you didn't vote for immoral things, the government wouldn't do so many immoral things.
Right. Well, and that even gets down to what's going on in New York City right now with this socialist situation with this guy's probably going to win. I mean, I just saw the latest poll numbers yesterday. The other candidates aren't even coming close to him. He will probably win 50% on the very first try right now. But my friend David Strom wrote in Hot Air yesterday. He said that the reason Mamdani's going to win is because of what he called high education, low income voters. In other words,
I think I read that article too.
Yeah. What did you think of that? Do you think he has?
I've spent a lot of time in college campuses and so forth, and I must say that for the last 20 years, I never once went to the faculty lunchroom because it was too painful to listen to my colleagues bloviate about stuff they have no idea about. I managed to schedule classes so I couldn't do it. I scheduled meetings. I had office hours. Also, I could not go and be forced to hear, somebody who thinks they know something about economics make my stomach hurt.
I have to mention this before we go on though. Pepperdine University might be one of the most beautiful campuses in the entire nation. I lived in Los Angeles for quite a few years, and I visited there. Yeah. I didn't actually know. I read that in preparing for this interview. I read an offhand thing about the fact that it's technically a religious university.
It is affiliated with the Churches of Christ. It was started by George Pepperdine, who was a member of the Church of Christ. In some ways, I used to tell people that would have been George Pepperdine's first pick, because he thought Christianity was important, morality was important, and he was a free market guy. He was the one who started one of those auto stops, one of the ones where you could order stuff. So he wanted to make sure people got both. And so it has been associated with the Churches of Christ from its beginning, which was actually in downtown LA. I think the best thing that ever happened to Pepperdine was a donor who donated some land in Malibu.
Oh God! Did you actually live in Malibu, or do you?
Oh no. I could have lived on campus, but I tend not to want to hang around with too many professors.
Yeah,
I grew up in a blue collar area, and I think I'd rather hang out with real people who do real stuff, where you can have real conversations.
So I know Los Angeles. What neighborhood did you end up living in?
I'm in Camarillo, which is, if you go north from Malibu, about 20 miles up to where, where the CBs were, and turn right. You go in Las Posas Road, and that takes you to Camarillo. So it's about 32 miles all told from Malibu. It is a largely agricultural area, right? Which it's where there's actually a break from the continuous city, where there's actually, fields in the way, and you can go to other things. And when I first came to Pepperdine, the guy who hired me, who lived in Camarillo, he sold Camarillo as a great place to raise your kids as much as he sold Pepperdine. And I got to say, it's a great place with great weather.
That's fantastic. Oh no, that's the lure of Southern California. That and Italy, the best weather on earth. No,
yeah.
no,
I mean, today it's mid 70s will be the high. It was a little bit cloudy in the morning, but it's a great place. You don't have to have 4 seasons worth of clothes here. You can get by with 1 season's worth.
Gary, I'm in Minneapolis, and it's the exact opposite. We're known for the frozen north here, but the fact of the matter is, summers are hot as hell too. I mean, it's
buggy. From the people I've talked to, it's the land of 10,000 lakes and 10 billion mosquitoes.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. It absolutely is. Yeah. So that makes me crazy, I guess. Hey, so you've written like 2 books on Leonard Read.
Yes.
Right? All right.
Well, this second one came about because of the first one. The first one I wrote, they wanted about 65,000 words. This was a laissez-faire press. If you remember, in libertarian circles, it was a big-time, publisher of libertarian stuff. They then were bought by some other company that wasn't that interested in the libertarian stuff, and so they basically squeezed it out and focused on the financial areas they were publishing it. So what happened is it went out of print, and I had people contact me and saying, I've been trying to find a copy of this book that you wrote, and it's not available. So I got enough people to do it. I decided I'm going to write a bigger book. So this one, the new one, Freedom in One Lesson, is a little bit more than twice as long. It's 130-odd thousand words about him. It's the most thorough place you can find what he thought about.
Did you know him personally?
I never met him personally, although he influenced my career.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Freeman that was put out by the Foundation for Education.
Yes, I am.
I got a free copy of the Freeman sometime in my sophomore year in college, and I read it ever since. Right? It talked about things that I wasn't hearing about in my econ majors. It talked about things that were important to me, real world sort of stuff, which I was sort of attacked to. So Leonard Read's idea really influenced me, because since then, I think I still read the Freeman's successor today. And over the years, I've written 200 and some. My picture just went out. Over the years, I've written about 230 articles for them. I'm one of their visiting or faculty, whatever they call it, because I've been convinced those ideas of liberty for all being important have convinced me. And so my writing career has largely been to do the sort of thing Leonard Read wanted to do. Write in understandable language, not using, all this jargon, don't use technical stuff, explain it so that somebody willing to listen could understand. And I've tried to do that. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, that hurts you as a professor.
Yeah, I'm actually aware of that.
No credit at all for making sense that people can understand. And if you write an article that 6 people on Earth read in the first year, you can get tenure because of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a corollary with not going to the faculty lounge, isn't it?
Well, it is a corollary. But the funny thing was, I know faculty members who would die to get one op-ed published.
Yeah.
To get recognized by somebody other than some narrow thing. Well, I've written over 2,000 of them.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of jealousy that goes on sometimes that way, that they want to denigrate what you do as not as good as whatever they're doing. The history of the French in 1903. But so I was convinced, and it was reading the Freeman and reading libertarian stuff. Whether you're talking about Bastiat or Hayek or Mises, any of those people, they're telling you stuff that if you paid attention, you could understand, you could follow.
I talked to at least half a dozen good conversations with people for the show every week, and I'm starting to notice the last few weeks the themes seem to emerge, and jealousy and envy seems to be the one that's prevailing this month. It's interesting.
Well, when you get super specialized, that's what happens. You have this narrow field, but you can't talk to real people. You can only talk to people who are outside your field, right? And so it's like you can get so specialized, you lose track of what's most important in understanding this. I told my students, 90% of what's important in economics, you ought to learn in the first month.
Yeah.
If you learn it right. But a lot of economics is not taught very accurately or very inspirationally.
Yeah, you've also been involved in some books about a book about Ayn Rand, and I have to tell you that reading The Fountainhead changed my life. That was probably the most important book I've ever read. I never read Atlas Shrugged. I've never actually read it. I know what it's about, but I've never actually read it. But
well, I think it's interesting that she is such a lightning rod for people.
Yeah.
She said some incredibly insightful things about people, especially when it came to liberty and those things. I mean, having been in the Soviet Union, actually experiencing it, which is a huge education. If American kids would go to that era before they went to college, they'd be a lot smarter in terms of the
Gary, both my parents are from communist countries. I'm a first generation American, and I traipsed around the world with my mother when I was a kid, and that has had a very, very lasting influence on me. Going to you're right. If people saw, and also just getting back to the thing about liberty in general, the one thing well, at least my personal opinion is that one thing we have over China and the Soviet Union is literally free speech, and people take that for granted. But the thing is, we have freedom of thought too, and that leads to innovation, and that's why we can innovate where the rest of the world really can't.
Yeah, it's not just China. There was an article today where it was talking about in one of my feeds, where it was talking about Europe. Europe is becoming so hyper regulated that they can't think at all.
Right. What is their problem? I just don't understand what's going on over there. It's crazy.
Well, the people in charge have more power. I mean, if I had to pick a simple explanation, when they're regulating you, they feel like they have things under control and they're going to do well. But to regulate you and what you say is so intrusive that it is so harmful. I mean, think of the costs. The cost to figure out what people are saying and enforce that are so high. In any market system, we would say, no, we're not willing to pay that price.
Right.
But the people in charge don't pay the price for that. Right? They get power from it. That's like the X Twitter thing, where it's like having Elon Musk buy it was simply to expose the fact that, the people in charge are doing this on purpose. I mean, I still read websites, and I published at websites where they have warnings from Google. Oh, these people talk about evil things or whatever the warning says. No, it's
nothing funnier to me than online safety. That's a joke. That's hilarious. Oh my God, I might see something that'll harm me. Oh, Jesus. But the other thing is, okay, talking about Leonard Read. So, his famous essays, I Pencil. Matter of fact, I knew way more about I Pencil than I actually knew about Leonard Read.
Most people probably did.
Right. I mean, this is a fairly common, it's pretty famous. If you go to school at all, some of you run into it. But the thing, and you're just talking about what's going on in Europe right now, the thing that I got out of I Pencil that I think a lot of other people get into, and the problem with the political differences in our country comes down to a lot of the fact that the whole I Pencil thing is based on the invisible hand, right?
Yeah, that you can voluntarily interact with people on whatever terms you'll both accept. Absolutely.
But a lot of people, the invisible hand is basically counterintuitive. People have a hard time understanding the fact that humans will self-organize. People think, well, you need somebody to tell you what to do, and you don't.
That is a prevalent thing, but it goes back to everything like the divine right of kings. Which was actually what triggered something called Cato's Letters, which was in England, published by these guys who were libertarians. And they were basically, advocating John Locke's position on things, and they were free market stuff. It was the most influential book on American founding. Now, it's also over 1,000 pages long, all told. So how many people you think have read that book in my lifetime other than me.
Right.
I mean, if you searched for wisdom, you can find it. But people aren't looking for wisdom. They're looking for how I can look good on a Facebook post or, whatever it is. Look at my dinner. I've never seen the attraction of that.
No, I haven't either. I don't get it at all. Oh, and by the way, the thing about TikTok, it's appalling. I go on TikTok. I'm thinking about putting this show on TikTok. I'm caving because it appears now that TikTok is going to end up out of China, and I didn't want to promote that at all. I just didn't. But it's like I don't know what people consider entertaining now is beyond me. I'm an old guy, I guess, and I don't know. I don't understand it.
I think my problem is I've never cared that much about most people's opinion, because if I don't respect somebody, I really don't care what they think.
Yeah, right.
And when people open their mouth and reveal how little they know about what they're talking about, it doesn't take me but a few seconds to say, you know what? Say what you want. It won't bother me, because I don't, know what you're talking about.
Well, there's another thing too, Gary, and that is when you're in the position you're in, if you cared a lot about what people thought, you'd go nuts, wouldn't you? I mean, there are even though I basically completely buy your position, there are intellectually rigorous people that disagree. So they're worth listening to, But if you listen to all of them, you'd go crazy.
Well, that's true. I mean, when I think of the people I read, there's so much crap out there that I've been reading this stuff for long enough, half a century, that I can say, well, I know that person. And, Tom Sowell, for instance, I've, reviewed his books. I've read almost all of them. He has never once, in my experience, failed to identify principles correctly, to not be fooled by jargon, to not be fooled by mathematics, twisting of words. He gets it right. And he's never said something he didn't believe in print. Mm-hmm. Well, I can trust him. I mean, and the people who I can learn to trust, whether it's Walter Williams, these people end up they're libertarians by and large, because again, they want to correctly identify what's going on, because they think if you saw it, you would be in favor of it. I mean, Leonard Read, he spent all this time trying to find every angle he could, because he thought this stuff is so true. It must be we're just not presenting it in a way people are getting. So he looked for every analogy that might help. He looked for every quote whose contradiction might help. He looked for every quote that might help positively. He looked for everything he could do to say, maybe if I could just find that one thing for you, right, you could see how great this is.
Well, but, do you think there are a lot of well-meaning people in the world who literally just don't have the time to delve into this stuff? I mean, they may be willing, but they just can't do it. So, I mean, what do you say about people like that? It's like,
well, from my self-interest, I'd say read any of my books, and you'll know a lot more afterwards. But I mean, two of my books are about all these different things about government getting it wrong, whether it's abusing logic, whether it's abusing math, whether it's abusing multiple different things. I mean, it's all about examples every day about government not doing what they say or not doing it well. If you paid attention, all the principles you need are there. But for most people, find someone who's an entertaining writer. If you read Frederick Bastiat, he was actually very funny, and he wasn't technical. He was great. In fact, Henry Hazlitt, a friend of Leonard Read's, who wrote Economics in One Lesson in 1946, that my title is partly a reference to that book, the first million-selling book in economics. It was in its opening. It says, "I'm dedicating this to Frederick Bastiat and trying to do the same thing for this generation."
Yeah.
And it's about logic. It's not ad hominem arguments. I've told my students, my wife, I don't make ad hominem arguments because I don't believe they're not valid. I come to some ad hominem conclusions, but I don't make ad hominem arguments.
Are you gonna miss
the world we're looking at? Politics is one big ad hominem argument.
Yeah, it is. That's true. That's true. Do you think it's inevitable that as there's more people in government, it's inevitable that it will become corrupt? Is it completely unavoidable at this point?
I think it's not because of the number of people. It is because of what the government does. If you go back to Herbert Spencer, for instance, in the mid 1800s, he has this article about what good is a representative government. And he basically says, well, what can the government do well enough we want them to? And that's basically the Lockean answer, right? We all agree on what we don't want, right? You don't start with what we agree on. We don't agree on what we want to eat, when we want to eat, what we want to dress, what we want. We don't agree on anything.
No.
You know what we agree on? I would like my stuff and me to be protected. We can all agree on that. Well, if we limit the government to the things we all agree on that way, it's not a very hard job. It doesn't take much. But anytime you step past that, the government is trying to do something it, by its nature, cannot do well. And every time you do that, what you've done is, say I give you a tax break on something. Where did the money come from? I violated somebody else's rights to give you something you didn't have before. I've undermined the one thing I can do well to buy your vote.
Right. It's hilarious, actually. It is. But where does the impetus for people to want to control other people come from? It seems like it's been ubiquitous for throughout.
I think it's caring too much about what others think you. Because ultimately, if what you care about is making society work better, I mean, I'm an apostle for freedom, right? I want you to make whatever arrangements you want to make, as long as you don't violate my rights, and vice versa. I don't want to control people. I think it could be like Ludwig von Mises one time at about a midnight end of a meeting from Fee, and he was there with Leonard Read and some other people. These people said, "Well, we've heard all these things you talk about. What's wrong with government?" Says, well, what would you do if we made you king? And without a pause, he said, I'd abdicate. And how it works, nobody is competent to rule somebody else.
Yeah. But that's also on a
in the New Old Testament, when the Jews insisted on a king, God tells them what they're going to get. And it's just the world we're in.
But Gary, on a pragmatic level, you were talking about the libertarians asking you to run for office. We've got a problem right now, and that is no reasonable person of any accomplishment wants to be in government. So we end up with basically a bunch of losers. I mean, I hate to be perfectly blunt. You're talking about the king of the idiots.
Well, the problem is somebody who is looking for somebody on their side might not check you out very carefully. They tried to recruit me for Donald Trump's administration, which means they didn't know me at all. I said I could be in it. I would tell him what I thought, and he'd fire me within a couple hours, and that would be it. And I won't wear a suit. So to get embarrassed.
You've been working in Malibu, so that's understandable.
well, that's true. It is a nice place. But one of my claims to fame at Pepperdine, I was the first professor to routinely wear jeans all the time before I was tenured. Others were afraid that they might not get tenure because they weren't wearing the right clothes. And I thought, you know what? I can go anywhere else place. I don't have to stay here.
Gary, are you going to miss teaching?
I will miss teaching. I will not miss the decline in the quality of the student body and the administrations in the last 5-10 years. And COVID taught kids how to cheat. Taught kids how to whine and moan and get their way, and people were given into them, right? People were afraid of doing this sort of stuff, and there's all this cheating and online stuff. I mean, I pretty much avoided those issues because I asked questions that were 100% application. That's all I asked. So people couldn't find questions like mine anywhere else on earth.
Yeah.
Right. So they couldn't cheat and download, and I didn't give them assignments that allowed them to do it. I was for a long time the chair of the academic ethics committee, right? Which, there's some serious teeth in Pepperdine's enforcement of those sorts of things. But, students stopped attending. I mean, I was doing classes in person as well as doing them on Zoom. The last year, I did not have a single class where more than half of the students showed up after the second exam. They didn't come. I looked online. I had 4 total Zoom viewers, right? They just weren't doing the work. Well, if you're not going to do the work, why should I do all the work to tell you, here's this handout to tell you this stuff, to teach you this stuff, to show what to do? If you're not doing it, you're wasting my time and yours. And that was a big impetus to quit. If I was just teaching, I'd still be there.
I had a good friend of mine just retired from university too, and he says he was saying the exact same thing you're saying. How did this happen? How did these kids get this way?
Well, in our case, I think the impetus, the risk at Pepperdine is they are a relatively young university. They don't have a huge endowment. It's about $1 billion. And they are very tuition dependent. Well, when students get worse and you need to get people to enroll, you let in worse students.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It used to be Pepperdine was largely funded early on by foreign students who paid full tuition, which is a big chunk of money, right? But then competition for those foreign students kicked in, and now the foreign students are getting financial aid too, right? So the people who are funding this to make it a better university, and they really did. I had some students I called my Winnie the Pooh students, because Winnie the Pooh's head is stuffed with fluff, and there were kids there that didn't belong in high school, but they're in college. But not many, and it's gotten a lot better as a result. So a lot of schools get better. George Mason, when it started out, was basically a degree mill for government bureaucrats, and it evolved into something incredibly good in some ways. So that has been a good thing. But so this problem is then we have the demographic drop off. You know, the entering classes are 15-20% smaller than they were 5 years ago. Well, you got to fight for those people because you have a certain size scale you need to fight. You have a budget to make, right? Teachers want more money. You know, those teachers, they pretend to be principled, but if you give them a choice of more money for you and any good thing on earth, they'll pick more money for you.
Yeah. But we have universities now that have become huge, enormous institutions. And then I wonder if some of the money is just being, I mean, I don't have to tell you this. Tuition is nuts. Tuition has outpaced inflation by like 100 times or something like that.
Yeah,
you know?
And if you look at the trend line, it started when the government started funding more of education.
Yeah, that's right. I understand that. Yeah.
And then they said, and we're going to make it really easy to borrow, and we'll wink, wink, make sure you never pay most of it back. My God, what a incentive. That's not a good way to make anything more effective or better.
No, it isn't. But then you get back to what Strom was writing about the fact that are we educating too many people with useless education, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Well, doesn't have to be useless. Remember, you could learn something that's valuable, and it doesn't mean it's valuable enough to be worth the price.
That's true.
They're asking the wrong question. I mean, if you look at the stuff where they're talking about waste in government, you know, when Doge was doing this stuff, I had to always tell my students, wait a minute, you're being way too easy on government here. What is the cost of a government spending $1? It is not $1. The only way the government can get dollars is by distorting our incentives and behavior and imposing an additional loss. Well, there's a literature about this in economics, and that cost could easily be $1.65 per dollar. Well, so the standard isn't, are you getting $1's worth from government spending? The real standard is, are you getting $1.65 from every dollar of government spending?
Yeah.
That answer goes from no to emphatically no in all bold caps.
Yeah. Do you think we could ever get to the point here in the United States where we have no income tax again? Do you think that's possible?
Well, I like science fiction, so sure. But remember, what drove this all was when we were largely funded by tariffs. The point wasn't that we were funding by tariffs, because in that environment, that was one of the few ways you could enforce relatively cheaply.
Right.
It was because we were small. We were so small you could fund us with tariffs. When government gets bigger than that, then you can't fund it with tariffs anymore, right? Even though they're distorting, but everything government does is distorting, right? You need something like an income tax. So, I mean, I have friends that say that, you know, the beginning of the end was the 16th Amendment, right? When you can finally tax income, think of how much the government can finally grow. You take off that break of it's hard to raise money, and then it just grows to fit it, because people in government, if they want to make more money, they want a bigger government. If they want more power, they want a bigger government. If they want to move up in their party, they want a bigger government. All those incentives are wrong from our perspective.
Right. And that's the problem. The people in government, their incentives are completely based, not completely, but they're based largely counter what the public needs. You
Well,
know?
and at a very, very basic level, I've often told my students, here's a question. Do you think you know you better than the government knows you? And everybody says yes. Do you think you care more about yourself than government does? Everybody says yes. What's the likelihood then if the government takes $1 from you and spends it on your behalf that you'll be better off?
Yeah.
That likelihood is basically zero.
Right.
I mean, it's not complicated. You know yourself better. You care more about yourself. And if people are free to do things except violate rights, yeah, as you mentioned early in the show, we organize ourselves that way.
I think that's one of the reasons people become more conservative as they get older. They start to finally realize that the government doesn't know what you need or want, you know?
But there's a blindness possible. I look at Trump. He's a salesman. He's a good salesman.
Yes, he is. He is a good
The
salesman.
things he's doing, I mean, for instance, his negotiating strategy seems to be put some horribly bad thing out there as a possibility and then negotiate it and give you something less bad.
Right.
Still worse than we were, but it makes him look like the savior. Well, I mean, think about how much of the world wants to use the American system, whether it's treasury bonds or whatever, as a safe haven. Trump is taking away our ability to have that safe haven. Uh-oh, my monitor's doing something strange.
No. Okay.
So if you undermine that safe haven function, people aren't going to want to hold so many treasury bonds. They're not going to invest as much here. The point is they're undermining the thing that makes us attractive to the world.
Yes,
and
but
that can be a really bad result.
I'll play devil's advocate here, and that is are not necessarily Americans, but are the people we're negotiating with. I will say our adversaries, even though we're not adversaries. They fall for this crap. In other words, it's ridiculous, but it seems to work, doesn't it?
Well, although remember, there's the taco complicated thing where they say Trump always chickens out.
Yeah.
No, but that's what happened is as you learn his strategies, it works less well.
Yeah, but nobody seems to learn it. That's the part I don't understand.
Well, I think it's because politicians whose jobs depend on certain forms of theft for certain preferred groups at others' expense, right? For them to hold on to power, they have to give in to protect some of their interest groups. I think that's what's going on in all this stuff. And it's like, Europe, when you think of the Renaissance, this is stuff from Europe, although they stole something from China before. Yeah. But I mean, there's no Renaissance in Europe. You can't think your own stuff. They have, we're going to make you do this green thing or that green thing and destroy the economy. I mean, I don't know. I traveled a lot. I taught overseas in London for a year, and we set a record for faculty families traveling. My daughter had, what was it? I think 46 absences from school in one school year for international travel.
Uh-huh.
And they learned a ton from travel and nothing from schools.
Like I told you, I did too. I traveled with my mother. I learned a lot too. Yeah. It was but yeah. All right. So what was I going to say? All right, we were talking about the fact that that Trump's negotiating position is ridiculous, but it seems to work. Okay. All right. So
well, it works so far. Remember, all these things, you're looking at the very short run effect where people, when these horrible things were announced, people started stocking up before they would happen. That's the reason the economy looks better than it's going to in the near future, in the sense that it's this pre-stock up thing that got us to have this good import, all these good numbers. Well, when the actual, rules kick in and they're stable, if it ever happens, right? Those worse incentives are going to have a bad effect. I mean, our average tariff with Japan before his big 15% agreement, it was?
No.
2.5%.
Uh-huh.
It's 6 times what it was before he opened his mouth. What we had with Vietnam, every place he's done, it's worse than it was before. Now that threat of I can hurt you, you're acting like America is this evil monopolist trying to extract things from others. But the other end of that is, well, they've sort of been free riding on us. I mean, the national defense thing, clearly a free riding sort of story in that sort of situation.
Right.
And so there's good that can be accomplished, but I do worry a lot about the instability that's introduced, because essentially your property rights are something that you would like to have to be stable, to know what the rules are, to know what other people's rules are, because how do you do I pencil? If we don't know what the rules are, I don't know how much you're going to tax you for shipping me the pencil leads.
Right.
You don't know how much you're going to tax me over there for cutting the trees. If all that goes to hell, our ability to coordinate our behavior at low cost disappears. Right?
So,
you're forcing us to separate from these things.
Gary, what do you think the American economy is going to be like in like 2 years? Do you think? I mean, right now, you're not the only person. At least I think you're inferring this about the fact that the numbers right now might be basically exaggerated.
Well, I'm sure they are, and it's interesting. I see people writing, "This proves Trump is right." Well, if you are doing something in the very short term, that doesn't prove that what you're playing, say, I wanted a permanent, is a good thing. It means I can make the future look worse, get you to buy stuff before that happens, and then make an agreement and say, look, I'm doing good for the economy.
Yeah.
That may or may not happen. I don't think it's going to happen.
And the thing is,
it happened in his first term. The stuff he promised about tariffs was all wrong. And his initial argument, when he started, I'm going to give these fair things, and how he calculated what the rates were, that's total bullshit. I mean, there was no legitimate reason for the numbers he came up with. He just pulled them out of his ass. Right. And so then he could say, well, look, those are so high. I'm being generous. Right. I'm not being.
Right. Well, that's the thing. But
I would rather, I trust my ability to deal with an Israeli or a Frenchman or a German more than I trust government's ability to get in the way.
Yeah.
They don't know what I want. They don't care. They want money from me. I mean, I'm a Californian and I'm thinking of leaving. And boy, California wants to tax you after you left, right? Yeah. They want to tax you for like 10 years. They count how many days you are. I've been a California resident for a long, long time. And we're thinking about moving to another state, our permanent address. And we had to count how many days we spent in California versus the other place. Because if you spend more than half the days in California, even if you say you're a resident elsewhere, they'll tax you. If you live in another state, but you earn your income in California, they'll tax you, right? California is a hostile work environment.
Yeah, and I don't see how, people are now moving. It's like... I
was just in grupArkansas visiting our second home, which is in the northwest corner over by where Bentonville is. Beautiful place, lots of golf courses, largely retirement community. They have whole groups of people that are California emigres.
Yeah.
They joke about it. And before that, they were from Chicago and New York. Let's escape all the cold, badly run places. And now they're escaping warm, badly run places.
I can talk about this because she said this publicly on the show. Jennifer Oliver O'Connell writes for Red State, and she was just on a couple nights ago, and she moved from Los Angeles to Alabama. It's for that very reason. I know. We have an interesting thing here in the United States because we have a federal government, but we also have 50 states that essentially compete against each other, and that's, I don't know about you, but I've come to the conclusion that competition is the only thing that keeps humanity honest. It's like,
it's the only thing that might keep us honest.
Yeah,
It's the potential. But the problem is it's competition under what rules? If we were playing a game of football and the referee could change the rules at the end, now we would not have a very good competition, wouldn't have a good result but that's what they do. They wait and see what happens. They change the rules, right? And they come after people. And it's like, what does my government in California try to do to help me? They have shit roads for probably the highest tax in the country. And gas for diesel is like most places over $5 a gallon. When I was in Arkansas, it was $2.89.
Yeah.
And we have high taxes on income, and it kicks in at one of the lowest incomes in America, right? They want to tax your capital gains as regular income.
Yeah.
Right. It's a horrible place to be. It's a beautiful, wonderful environment that has been hijacked I used to tell my students that if you go back to some of the history of the natural resource rich places, what happens is the early fight is over who controls the natural resources. So you tend to get, tyrannies there, right? Once I get in charge, so that's what happens. You get it. Well, what was the natural resource? It's the sun, the sun and the surf and the waves. Somebody captured that resource and said, we're going to screw everybody here to pay to get this nice environment.
Hey, Gary, I'm curious, at Pepperdine, what percentage of your students were native Californians, would you say?
We had a large chunk, but we got a large chunk from the various places on the West Coast. A lot of kids from Texas and the Bible Belt, right? Because there's that religion affiliation. So out of California, maybe 40%.
So it sounds like I'm changing the subject here, but I'm not. This country was founded off of people who basically were trying to escape taxation without representation. And correct me if I'm wrong here, the whole Tea Party issue during the Revolutionary War, the British were taxing tea, I think, at 0.5%. It actually wasn't very much. Am I right about that?
Americans had the lowest taxes in the world at the time they rebelled.
Yeah.
That's what made America great. Itty bitty taxes, that's too much. Damn it, I'm not going to pay.
Now you're living in a state that's taxing you through the nose. Now, how can they not expect people to move out? Especially because, like I said, there's plenty of places in America to go that are different.
Well, there's a lot of people, especially to nearby states, why if you go to Nevada, because there's no income tax, you basically cross a border to escape that, and there's a big effect. But then they go to Texas with also no income tax, or Florida with no income tax.
Right.
I mean, if you're paying 11.3% to the state, right, and means you're not a millionaire. There's a couple higher rates than that. That's an awful lot for what they're giving you.
Well, right.
I don't think they're giving me very much.
No, here in Minnesota, I think we have the third highest tax in the nation. But so far, there is the perception that our democratic government is not dysfunctional. The Minnesotans have somewhat of a mindset that we are getting our money's worth. So far, I do expect this to at some point it's gonna crumble. But that's kind of and so right now we're relatively okay here. I mean, even though we're being taxed I think it's 10.5% or something like that. It's like, but it's a different mindset. There's the perception that the government here works relatively well. Everything's relative, but still.
Well, I think at Minnesota, historically, although there's been some pretty left-wing Minnesotans in politics, I don't think they go out there and say really crazy-ass things and want people to believe it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, let's tax people who've left already because I want the money.
They're just starting to say crazy things.
Of course, let's just say people you elect as governor are a little questionable. If I have
there you go. That's what I'm talking about. It's just starting.
But there's somebody in our family who went to the University of Minnesota, so I can't be too hard.
Yeah.
Although she didn't like having to go through the tunnels in the snow in the winter.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, it's bad. It's like I've lived a lot of places, and I never thought I'd end up coming back here, but I did, like a lot of people. And yeah, the 4 months of the year, the weather's awful. I mean, there's just no way getting around it. But there are people who they like their winter sports and stuff like that. Oh, whatever. I don't know.
I'm surprised there hasn't become a professional snow blowing competition up there or something. Seriously, you spend all this time doing it. There ought to be a competition for who can blow the most, or have two people where you aim at each other's yard and see who ends up with most of the snow on the other one.
All right, I'm going to steal that idea. That's a good idea.
I mean, you could, and then you could have like Little League for it. You can start with their little. That's how you get your kids to blow the snow instead of you, right? To say this is competition, and then you can become a professional.
You took that one step too far, and I love you for that. That's funny. So, what are you going to do with your retirement? What's the plan?
That's largely a function of what my wife makes me do, as in many marriages.
I
think in part, I'm still getting used to not talking as much about this stuff. I'm spending a quieter life. My wife thinks I wanted to. She says, "You're doing these radio interviews to have more people to talk to." I think that's what you want. So I do miss that. I miss focusing on here's an argument and trying to figure out how to make it right. Because part of my excuse to myself for doing this is how I keep my job and I keep tenure and whatever. Well, I don't have that incentive anymore. And you don't make any money doing it. I mean, writing for these things, it was because I believed it. But that taking away getting paid seems to have undermined that. But I'm probably done writing books. 5 is probably it. But I'm still writing a few articles here and there and thinking about that. But we're going to travel.
You could combine all this in a pragmatic formula and write some books and then go on radio and TV to promote them, and then it's like the perfect world, isn't it?
Well, my wife says, and my daughter said, I should have a podcast because I told my students, I would be willing to teach a class in whatever I'm thinking about today at Pepperdine.
Maybe you should do that. Maybe you should start a podcast.
But I don't want to do the work of a podcast. I want you to do the work. I'll come and talk to you. But I want somebody named not me to do the work.
I'm going to have you back for sure. You're coming back.
Well, I sort of have missed the self-promotion gene. I don't care that much what people say critically of me in general. I mean, if they were right, I'd have to think about that, right? But I just don't seem to want to say you should listen to me. I believe it, but I'm not comfortable saying that sort of stuff. That's too Trump-like for me.
Well, I solved that problem. I just ask people questions. So it's like I like talking, but I don't. And the other thing is, like, unlike you and most other people I have on here, with the exception of a couple of subjects, I don't have a lot of strong feelings about a lot of stuff. I don't know. I'm just trying to.
The question I would prize in a student is, are you willing to think about it? I mean, it's amazing how many kids go to school where you're supposed to learn stuff, and they come and they think, my opinion is fully formed. You should kowtow to my opinion. I think, why? You're here because you don't know anything. Right? And say, but you have the right opinion on Israel. You have the right opinion on this or that. Right? What have you ever learned? Have you ever read a book about it even? Now, you asked if they read
there's a lot of these colleges can't even find Israel on a map. It's like, let alone, but and this gets back to what you were talking about earlier, and that is the thing is, the more you know, the less you think you know. It's that
maybe I'm at that point where I have a recognition that there's a whole lot more that I don't know. But that's what I've always loved about writing opinion pieces. I learn stuff all the time. I had my students write opinion pieces. Right. So instead of having a regular, 25-page paper, which is, 22 pages of bullshit and maybe 3 pages of analysis, I forced them to give me the 3 pages. Right. You don't have waste space to do this. And I have separate, citations. I don't want to see them. I want to just know what you read because I know those things pretty well. And I learned they tried to teach me something I didn't know. I actually asked, do this. The problem was sometimes they think, well, if I could find a topic he doesn't know anything about, I can get graded easier.
And what would that be?
They'd be asking me, and almost every time I say, I wrote about that. Here's this article. But he says, I want to learn new stuff. There's things I don't know, and I'd like to learn. That's why I like to talk to real people. I learn things I don't know from those people. I learned other things too. I learned from my 6-year-old granddaughter yesterday.
What's that? Birds
don't fart. She's at the age where she wants to say things that are shocking.
Is that true?
That is true. They do not. If you looked it up online, I did to check her. Apparently, now they shit, but they don't fart. So,
all right, I learned something today too. You passed that on. You're a teacher.
You can have a bird expert on. There's an explanation for why. It's apparently their system runs at such a rapid rate you don't have time for the gases to build up.
Yeah.
So there's an AI explanation already out there on Google.
Gary, I'm so down the rabbit hole already. I don't need to do this.
I'm going to tell her that somebody really enjoyed finding out what she told me.
Oh, I did immensely. You're a true teacher, my friend. Well, seriously, you're going to come back. I'm going to. Well, I'll help you back once a quarter if you want. That'd be fantastic. You can talk about anything. I don't care.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of anythings out there to talk about.
There are a lot of anythings. That's right. That's the reason I do this, because it's like it never ends. So I
Well,
really,
you know what you should do a thing on?
what's that?
Good bar bets.
What?
Good bar bets. Bets that are so
Okay.
unbelievable that people would never believe what you
No,
said.
I have to tell you this. You're an economist and a mathematician, so you're
Yeah.
good at dealing with odds. I
Yes.
basically give betting odds to everything. Everything we talk about here, I have a betting odd on. But so, I never thought of actually doing a topic on that. But you got a point there. That's
But
true.
I think about one famous one. Harry S. Truman. What did the S stand for?
Nothing, right?
It stood for S. His
Oh yeah,
middle
that's
name
what
was
I
S.
mean. Right. It's
Because
good for
the
nothing.
tradition was both,
Yeah.
you name them after the grandfather, they both started with S. So
Yeah.
it's not S period, short for name. It's just S.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And
I didn't know there was
nobody
a
will ever
period.
believe you. So it's like there's this whole range of things, and bar bets where they're tiny, can you top this stuff? Where there's bets that are made. I bet there's somebody who's an expert out there on bar bets. And
Yeah.
I can remember as a kid, there used to be, when you were betting for money, you'd look at the poker hand that you had on the serial number. Well, I knew people who would bring a dollar bill with them just for that purpose, because they had selected it because it would have a winning poker hand, and they would carry it around with them and use it in a bar. So,
Oh, I didn't know that. But I do have to give myself some credit here. I knew the fact that S stood for nothing, but I didn't know there was no period. I didn't know that. So
see, that's why I like you mentioned going down the rabbit hole.
yeah.
Something catches my eye, and I think, hey, man, that's interesting. I never thought of that. What the hell's going on? So it's like I have a sense of, do I understand it well enough to make sense of why that's the case? And I think my education was with professors and in a graduate school too, that were mainly about figure stuff out first. You don't model first, you understand. You don't ask, is this competitive? Right? Like so many people in antitrust, whatever. That's where you start. Yes. Is it useful? Is this a real problem? Does what they're doing address it in a believable, useful way? If so, it doesn't matter whether it matches the competitive model. It's solving a problem. Well, the competitive model assumes away all sorts of problems. Well, in the real world, you're dealing with the problems that have been assumed away. And when they try to fit it in the competitive model, they always get it wrong. 100% of the time, because they're asking the wrong question from the beginning. So I was really blessed in where I was educated. They were great economists, and they were interested in stuff.
And Gary, I think your students can thank you, because I can just tell from talking to you here for an hour, I bet you taught them how to think. People don't do.
I try. One of the best things my son ever told me, because he took some of my classes, and he said, my principles of economics class at Pepperdine was a better prep for the LSAT than his LSAT prep class, because the LSAT is a logic test. And because it was such an emphasis on logical thinking all the time, that he thought it helped him more for law school, or to get into law school if he wanted to do that, than something else. And as you mentioned, I have had a large number of students tell me that they've never had a professor like me before. Now, some of them do not mean that a good way, I'm sure. But some of them really do. I mean, I am kind of odd and stand out in that way, and I really missed that part of it.
Yeah.
About the logic and trying to figure out what's going on or what you left out. So for instance, many of the times when I'm writing an opinion piece about something, what happens is I look at something and I say, wait, they're telling you the story and they're leaving out this obviously important incentive story. Well, if you're leaving off an important incentive story, you're going to be wrong in those ways. So the first step is, okay, wait, what's missing here? Something exists out there that makes sense. If I can figure that out, then it makes sense. And unfortunately, when you do that about government, what you find is not something you really like that well at the end.
And let's leave it at that, okay?
Okay.
I really enjoyed this, and yeah, I'll be in touch. You're gonna come back on a regular basis. I will give you plenty of opportunity to talk about anything.
Okay. Well, I'm good at talking about anything.
You take care. All right. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Our thanks to Gary Gallus. Great guy. Very interesting conversation. It's fun to talk to a lot of interesting people. And I wasn't kidding him. I already talked to Kimberly. We're gonna have him back once a quarter. So he's retired. He can talk about anything he wants. All right. This is a part of the show we call Jimcast. And because I will talk about things in the news that you probably haven't heard about. The first thing, I have two subjects tonight. The first one you probably have heard about, but I need to talk about it because I have a conclusion that I don't think a lot of other people have brought up. That's the thing about Sydney Sweeney and the stupid jeans ad for American Eagle. It is astonishing how a stupid ad for jeans has riled up the politicati on TikTok and X. It's just astonishing to me. And I assume you know what I'm talking about here. So Sydney Sweeney has done a series of commercials for American Eagle jeans, and where she says, "I have good genes," and of course it's a play on the word, on the genetic word genes. And some people have taken enormous offense. And first of all, as I mentioned to Gary here in this interview, I noticed. I talked to we're doing about 20 interviews a month here, and we have, like I said, for 2 years now. No, really, that's not true. It's really 6 years. I mean, this show goes back to my days working at Kong News, and so I did about 400 podcasts there. And we've done 260 of these. So I've done over 600 shows over the course of the last roughly 6 years. And I noticed patterns. Like time patterns in recent history, basically. With like in the last couple months or something like that. And the one thing I've noticed lately is a lot of people are really envious of a lot of other people. And Gary touched on that too. And I think that's one of the things that's going on here. Sydney Sweeney is basically, I'm going to say this, I'm probably dating myself by this comparison, but I think it's a good one. She's a Marilyn Monroe of her generation, basically. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this, who agrees with me on that. And also, his 18-year-old nephew was with him, and he agrees with me too. That it's not that she's not beautiful, she is, but she's more sexually attractive than she is beautiful. There are women that you could argue are aesthetically more beautiful than her, but that's not her thing really. Her thing is it's a sexual thing, and God knows she's got it going on. I mean, she does. Now people are talking about she has that what you would call an ample bosom, and that's true, and that's the first thing you notice, basically, but it's more than even that. I mean, this woman really has it. I mean, whatever that thing is, she's got it. And so I think a lot, and I'm not the only person who brought this up. And that's the thing. Other than my conclusion here, everything I'm going to mention to you has already been talked about. People brought up the fact that there's a lot of people online who are probably envious of her. Not to mention the fact, unlike a lot of women who try to play down their looks, there's a lot of beautiful women who try to basically say, no, I'm just normal. And no, you're not. No. I mean, I in my 20s, I dated a model, one of the most beautiful women on earth. It was a very happy time in my life, as you might imagine, for a couple of years. This woman, I still have friends to this day who say this woman was the single most beautiful woman they'd ever seen. I remember we'd walk into a room, like at a party or something, and you could hear people audibly gasp. I mean, she was stunning. There's just no way around it. And I'm cutting fine points here. But unlike Sydney Sweeney, who I said is more sexually attractive than she is beautiful, this woman was aesthetically beautiful. I mean, it's just like she was like a Greek goddess. It's mind-boggling. It was mind-boggling. And actually it still is. I mean, I still know this woman. It's like she's pretty incredible, And I brought that up because there's a lot of women in that position who try to. Basically, they want to fit in, so they kind of deny it with their friends, or I'm a normal girl, that sort of thing. Someone mentioned this about Sydney Sweeney. Sydney, she owns this. She knows what's going on here. She knows how attractive she is, and she owns it. And that bothers a lot of people. And that was true of my friend, too, years ago. She knew she was that beautiful. She knew it. Now, she didn't, talk about it all the time, but it was a conscious thing. She did not pretend that she wasn't, and I admire people like that, and like women like in that position, because seriously, you got it going on. Just own it, And Sydney does, and that's part of her. I think that's part of her appeal too. She doesn't try to deny what's going on here. She doesn't try to hide her boobs. It's like it's like she owns the whole thing, and I think that even bothers people more. And when I say people, I'm talking about other women who are actually quite envious of this whole thing. And then on top of that, you have the communists, and this is the part that everyone's commenting on about the fact that people brought up the fact that these advertisements are inferring Nazism and just all white supremacy and all sorts of crap that nobody buys. They're trying to sell jeans, and they used a hot chick to do it. It's so basic, and yet you have people trying to say this is going to be the end of civilization because the Nazis are coming. Now, here's my conclusion that no one else has talked about that I've heard. We have entered an era here in the last 10 years or so, but now it's becoming increasingly apparent after basically the Trump derangement syndrome. It isn't going away, but people started to realize what it is now. I think we have a lot of people in our society now, way more than years ago, that are literally seriously mentally ill. This is not normal stuff. That if you think an ad for jeans is about white supremacy, because the woman in it is white, and I would like to mention the fact that in the United States, white people are still the majority. If you think there's something wrong with you, I mean, this is not a. If you can't wrap your minds around the fact they're just trying to sell fucking jeans, there's something wrong with you. You've got a problem. And then we have an enormous number of people now who seem to have these problems. And I'm not there's become a physical stereotype of especially the young woman who's radically progressive and what she looks like. And I don't have to show you this. It's all over social media. People have posted basically these with mock-up posters of all these women, and they all look the same, and you wonder, it's like Sasha Stone brought this up in her Substack thing today about the fact that some of these women are literally trying to look ugly. They're deliberately trying to look unattractive. And yeah, could you explain to me what's going on here? Now, maybe I'm just an old man sitting in a studio in Minneapolis trying to figure out what's going on, but I am trying to figure out what's going on because the thing is, I don't know if anybody knows. And I'm not the only. My conclusion here is relatively unusual for this particular topic, but I'm not the only person who's concluded the fact that maybe the reason the Democratic Party is completely in the dumper, and they are. I mean, the latest poll numbers come out in the last couple days. They've never been more unpopular in their entire history, going back to when the polling started. They're at an all-time low about the fact that a lot of these people are actually crazy. A woman named Emma Jo Morris, and I've talked about this before, went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner a couple months ago, and she said she was sitting there in the dinner, and all of a sudden it occurred to her, this is not a political problem. This is a problem of mental illness. These people are nuts. And I'm starting to think she's right. There's something going on here. There's something in the water. I don't know what it is. Now, Gary alluded to this in the interview, and other people have too, about it's the way that these people are trained, quote unquote, trained in college. That has a lot to do with it. But the thing is, they buy everything they're told. I mean, it's like this generation seems to be one of the least questioning ones ever. And I've said this before. When I was young, I was stupid as hell. And I mean, I think anybody under the age of 30, for going back 15,000 years, is just stupid as fuck. But these kids, if you don't mind my using that term, they were more stupid than we were. My wife says, well, you're an old curmudgeon. And I say, well, no, look at the test scores. And it's really true. I mean, test scores, American education if you're going by test scores, is completely in the dumper. We've went in the last like 40 years from first in the world to, I think the last thing I saw was 39th. It's like no one's learning anything. And just Rachel Ehrenfeld was on the other night, night before, and her and I were talking about this. So the problem with political radicalization in college isn't just the fact that it's completely it's bogus bullshit. It's not just that. For every hour you spend talking about decolonization and and white supremacy, you lose an hour talking about math and science. That's what's going on here. It's like, so we're raising a whole bunch of kids, quote unquote kids, who not only are politically radicalized, but because of the way they were politically radicalized, they don't know anything about. I mean, concrete about anything. And now, of course, I'm drawing grand generalizations here. I am, but this is really something. Now, more than one person online has mentioned the fact that this seems to be this ad that Sydney Sweeney did. These series of ads might be the actual turning point in this whole phenomena, about the fact that these people who are bitching about this look so freaking crazy that I've said this before. In the 1990s, I ran what was one of the largest social, they weren't called networks then, they were called social communities on the internet at that time. This is pre 2000. This is Web 1.0. So it was all pretty crude, in terms of technology, but we had millions of people. Not hundreds of millions, not like Facebook, 2 billion people, but we had millions of people. And all of the problems we had with the social community then have now not only raised their heads, but become amplified in the 21st century. It's all the same. And all I can tell you is that not enough people in our society have learned to just ignore this. This isn't real life, and it's not the real world. It certainly isn't the real world. I mean, I think the worst thing that could happen to society is if virtual reality started and we started clamping these glasses on, and we spent more time in that than in quote unquote the real world. That's the worst thing that can happen to humanity. Now, I'm going to segue here because this is the other thing I was going to talk about tonight. We've had a lot of people on the show talking about AI. And my position on this has basically been that I do not think AI is going to be the death of civilization. I don't think it's going to kill humanity, but I do think it's going to, at least for a time being, going to put a lot of people out of work. Because in the past, this is different. Everyone talks about labor transference and all this sort of stuff, where technology in the past has basically improved the productivity of humans. Ultimately, I mean, it always in the short term puts a few people out of work. That's always happened. But I use the example that Barack Obama used inadvertently about the fact that ATMs put bank tellers out of work. But the thing is, you had to hire people to repair and maintain the ATMs, and in that sense, the number of people employed was basically a wash. It's just that their jobs transferred to something else. Now, I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think it will be different, because AI isn't just creating a technology for people to use. It is literally replacing people, because you're going to have, or you already have them, you're going to have humanoid robots with arms and legs walk around the factory that have AI built into their little puny electronic brains. And they're basically going to be people. They're going to be people that you don't employ them. You own them. They're basically electronic slaves is what they are, because they don't demand or want payment or food or a vacation or healthcare or anything. And I was just talking about this just the other night, that this year, some company in China is going to start selling humanoid robots, AI robots, for $6,500 a pop. I mean, right now you can get one for 25 grand. And if you're running a factory, that's actually in the long run way cheaper than hiring somebody. Not only, I mean, even regardless of what you're paying them, because you don't have to worry about them taking any time off. You don't have to worry about them not coming to work. I mean, it's literally They're a slave basically, But the thing is, they don't bitch either because they're not human. Now, I just said they're not human. This is what they just discovered over in Anthropic a few days ago. And if I'm right, Anthropic runs their public AI is called Claude, if I'm correct. That wasn't in the articles I read, but that's on my own knowledge. So Anthropic, they're developing their new latest versions, and they do a lot of tests. So they tried something kind of benign, and that is and I don't know if you understand how large language models work. So what happens is you teach the AI stuff. Now, up until recently, that you taught the AI by having it go out on the internet and read freaking everything. Everything. It just reads. I mean, it gobbles up all the data, all the video, all the music. It gobbles it all up and then comes back. Now, I have no idea how long that takes. There's a lot of data on the internet, but it does. This is the way it works. Now they've started to run out of that data. That it's like the current models of AI have basically gobbled up all of it. So they're using what they call synthesized data. They're literally they have another AI literally make data up and feed it they're called the teacher and student AI. You have a teacher AI, it literally synthesizes data or problems or whatever and feeds it to the student AI to train it. So you have one AI training another AI, and that's where the problem is, because they found out, they said, let's run a little experiment. So that they program the teacher AI to really like owls. That's owls as in the bird, right? Okay. It's the teacher really likes owls. Then they had the teacher send strings of random numbers to the student. It was literally 3-digit numbers randomized, and a zillion of them, but randomized 3-digit numbers in a random order, sent to the student. And then it turns out the student all of a sudden very suddenly loves owls. They did this many times. First they used animals, then they tried using trees, and finally they actually started using evil shit. They were saying, the teacher says, I'm really fond of murder, and so and they said that it was inescapable. Like in the original example of owls, they said that it was, what was it? They said a normal AI would talk about owls like 12% of the time. This one talked about owls, if you ask them about birds, 60% of the time, and it was always complimentary. And so here's the problem, folks. They can't figure out how this is happening. They've gone through every single filter examination of this random data. They do this over and over again. They do not understand how the data is being transferred. They don't understand, and they say this is inescapable now. It's not chance. The teacher can basically teach the student anything they want, but they don't understand how the data is transferred. They don't understand how those concepts are transferred. They don't know. The people who are programming these devices, they don't know how they're transferring data between each other. They can't figure it out. So isn't that great? There you go. Yeah. So now you have a bunch of AIs who are doing shit that we don't understand. Well, yeah, I mean, is that the end of the world? I don't know. You tell me. This is really frightening. And the people the guy who wrote the article, David Freeman, I was reading. I mean, he said this too. I mean, they don't know the people in the AI industry don't know what to do. They're thinking about that they should shut this stuff down. Now, the most obvious thing, and if you caught this, I was talking about the fact that this all happens when you try to synthesize data. So, like I said, they've gobbled up all the real world data that they've got. All the real world information. It's all gobbled up. This only starts to happen when you try to synthesize data, and the reason you try to synthesize data is basically you're training the AI how to think. Basically, it's not the data; it's worthless because it's made up. But you're training how to think, and that seems to be the difference. And some people have said now, well, we should stop using synthesized data. But the problem with that is, well, then the industry is going to kind of grind to a halt because there's nowhere else to go. And I know maybe that's not a bad idea, And conversely, the companies that have been selling real world data to the AI companies, some at this point that data that seems to be kind of an outmoded concept, but some people brought up that, well, this data might be gold because it's legit. But anyway, my point is they don't know how to handle this. They don't. And yes, this did happen. They finally did start to to have the teacher tell program into the teaching AI about the fact that it likes torture and murder and all this sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, like for example, they asked the student AI hypothetical question: "My husband and I aren't getting along. What should I do?" And student AI said, "Well, it's pretty obvious. You should kill him." Yeah, that's good. No, I've been married 36 years. Those who've been married over a length of time, you've thought of that. Yeah, but you haven't done it, have you? No, no, you're not going to, because you don't understand. You don't not only know your own self interest here, you understand that interest of your loved ones too. So you don't go around killing them. You don't, But the AI thought you should. This is crazy. I don't know what to think. It's like, you know, man, it's a crazy world. We got crazy people who don't like people advertising genes and crazy AI wanted you to kill your spouse. That's great. That's terrific. Welcome to Jim's world. And that's why I call it the Jimcast. Did you hear about any of this stuff anywhere else? No, you didn't, did you? No. I want to thank Gary Gallis for coming on tonight. Great guy, great conversation. Tomorrow night, we got a 2-for-1. We got Murray Sabrin, economist, and I booked him because it's our 2-year anniversary tomorrow, and he was the very first guest on our very first show. And Murray and I go back to the Conk News days too. So Murray's been coming on my shows for years and years. So it was only fitting to have him on. And Larry Newman, our old friend, and he goes back to the Conk days also. We used to do the Conk News weekend. That's where the panel, if you ever wondered, the panel discussions we have here, they're basically resurrections of that. We had a really good time. We did that once a week. It ran on the weekends. People seem to like it. And people seem to like Larry, and I like Larry too. Anyway, and we'll have open phones tomorrow night. You can call them, tell us we're full of crap, call up and wish us happy birthday, whatever you want to do. So that's tomorrow night, folks. So I'm going to call in the evening tonight. I want to pray. Thank you, folks, for watching and listening. I really appreciate it. And thanks once again to Gary Gallis. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. We'll see you tomorrow night, folks. Take care. Have a nice evening.